Let's go ahead and listen to this first.
Hey there, a quick favor. We are conducting an audience survey, and we would be really grateful if you could take just a few minutes to answer it. Please visit survey.prx.org/civics101 to take the survey today. That's survey.prx.org/civics101. Thanks.
Civics 101 is brought to you by Progressive. Have you tried the Name Your Price tool yet? It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to find a rate that works for you. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive. Get your quote today at progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Civics 101 is supported in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
The rights of students at school are not the same as the rights of adults.
Well, there is some distinction between practice and policy.
A particular standard applied to school newspapers would not allow the teacher to even correct misspelling.
This is Civics 101. I'm Nick Capodice. If you've listened to a few episodes of our show, you know that we don't have a lot of time. We try to keep these things down to about 15 minutes so they're digestible. And we can't really get into the moments of historical significance that are relevant to our episode topics, like landmark Supreme Court cases, actual presidential elections, all that fun stuff. And that's what we're going to do today. We're calling it Civics 101 IRL. It's the real historical moments relative to our episode topics. So I hope you have fun. Stick around. Last week I got this phone call from Dave Alcox.
Hey Nick, this is Dave Alcox from Milford High School.
And Mr. Alcox is a superstar social studies teacher here in New Hampshire and a professional DJ.
I've got some wicked great news for you. We're going to have John and Mary Beth Tinker from Tinker vs. Des Moines and Kathy Kellmeyer from Hazelwood vs. Kellmeyer come visit us at Milford High on November 2nd.
And I didn't want to sound like a complete fool when he called me, but the truth is I didn't know who these people were. And when I found out, I had to tell someone. So I grabbed producer Hannah McCarthy.
Yeah.
Come in.
Okay.
Do you have like 5 minutes?
I do, yeah. I have
Okay,
5 minutes. Okay.
Do you know who John Tinker, Mary Beth Tinker, or Kathy Kuhlmeyer are?
I have no idea.
Okay, it's okay because I didn't either, but I promise you I will go to my grave knowing the names Tinker, Fraser, Kuhlmeyer, and Frederick.
You gotta tell me who they are then.
These are 4 people involved in Supreme Court cases that drastically change First Amendment rights in schools.
I can't believe I haven't heard of this.
I'm pretty shocked I didn't know about that. Number 1, Tinker versus Des Moines.
John F. Tinker and Mary Beth Tinker, minors, etc. now. Petitioner versus Des Moines Independent Community School District now.
The Tinker's name being first means that they are the petitioners, and Des Moines being second means they are the respondent.
Okay, so that means that Des Moines is happy
Yes.
with the original decision. They don't want anything else to happen.
Right. The Tinkers lost the previous case, and Des Moines won the previous case. They're cool to thing. Mary Beth Tinker, this is a great story. Mary Beth Tinker was 13. Her brother John was about 16, I believe, when this happened. Their father was a Methodist minister, and he was very involved in the civil rights movement. And John and Mary Beth joined some students who were protesting the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War in the United States, it's the first time that war is coming to American living rooms.
Right, through television.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. The horrors of war. And they were going to protest by joining some students who were wearing black armbands.
Specifically, the views were that they mourned the dead of both sides, both civilian and military, in that war. And they supported the proposal that had been made by United States Senator Robert Kennedy that the truce, which had been proposed for that war over the Christmas period, be made an open-ended or indefinite truce.
Totally coincidentally, 2 days before this big protest of wearing black armbands, the principal of their school met with a bunch of other principals in Des Moines and passed a rule saying armbands are forbidden in our school district.
So were other kids wearing armbands?
Yeah, this was going to, well, they heard, the principal heard that this was going to be a thing that happened. Like, look, what are we going to do? Kids are going to be wearing armbands in school. It's going to be a disruption.
Okay, so you tried to preempt the whole thing.
Tried to preempt the whole thing, but they wore them to school anyways. and they were suspended. And immediately after they were suspended, they started getting the threats.
Ooh.
Yes, people called them a bunch of commies. Someone said they were going to firebomb their house. And one letter that actually Mary Beth still has to this day is like, "You're welcome to wear your armbands. Just do it on Saturday. You shouldn't be doing it in school." So they got in contact with the ACLU. They got a case together, and through appeals, it ends up in the Supreme Court. And the vote is 7-2 in favor of the Tinkers.
That is a landslide. Go
Yeah.
John and Mary Beth.
John and Mary Beth. So 7 justices wrote in the decision that yes, the First Amendment rights had been violated, and they had a right to protest in school. The justice who wrote the decision is Abe Fortas. So when you have a Supreme Court case,
I can hear you whispering back there. It's not very quiet. Please stop. Thank you.
there's a decision where the majority writes the majority of it, and then you can dissent. If you're someone who disagreed, you can write in the dissent. And Abe Fortas wrote the decision. He said, quote, "It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate." Those words are used over and over in other Supreme Court cases further down the line. It's a magnificent decision. And it creates this massive blanket precedent called the Tinker Standard, which is where you ask, was this speech disruptive? And if it's not disruptive, then it's protected in schools. John and Mary Beth Tinker, case 1969. And to this day, John and Mary Beth do what's called the Tinker Tour. They travel the country to tell students about their First Amendment rights.
That is very cool.
Yeah, Mary Beth once said, and one of my favorite quotes I found of hers, it's a good way of life to speak up, to use your rights. And she says that students are particularly in a position to speak up because students have virility, students are curious, students are the next generation who is going to challenge the way the previous generation had everything all set up. So later on, as the years go by, the Supreme Court has to decide, are there things besides disruption, quote unquote, that make something protected or not in schools? So now we're going to shoot forward in time to 1986.
We're there.
Bethel.
You should play some music.
Oh, I'm going to totally play 1986 music for this.
That's
Yeah,
a good idea.
it's going to be Cruel Summer.
Yeah.
The rule does not say one shall not swear in Latin class. The rule says that obscene or profane language will be considered disruptive.
1986, Bethel v. Frazier.
The facts in this case are that on April 26, 1983, Matt Frazier, a 17-year-old high school senior, gave a speech to the Associated Student Body.
Gave a speech nominating his friend Jeff for student body vice president. It was not full of cuss words.
He gave a crude and vulgar speech.
It was very lewd. And it was short, but it was just goofy, and it was all lewd. And I'm not gonna say it. If you want to read it, you can just go listen to it.
We can't stop you.
I can't stop you from Googling it. But to be honest, Hannah, it's like no worse than a lousy 7 or 5 model.
Okay.
Yeah, except it's way too short. And so it's it's not long enough to be a bad something else get. But it's just full of sexual innuendo.
Okay.
That's all it is. So then he was sent home for that. He went to court. He went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which ruled in his favor, saying that double entendres were protected as speech in schools. And then the Bethel district brought it up, and it got up to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. Bethel comes first. Bethel v. Frazier, because the Bethel School District is the petitioner of the case.
I'm a little surprised in the 80s.
Yeah.
That a school would even bother to say, no, it's our right to send you home when you exhibit lewd behavior.
Because it's about 1960s when Tinker happened. This is a time, the height of protests. It's the 60s. You know, America is learning how to protest in a new way. By the 1980s, this has kind of been accepted. You know, kids have freedom of speech in schools. Kids are expressing themselves. But can it be lewd? It was another 7-2 vote. And the answer is no. You cannot say lewd speech in school, and it is not protected in school.
The Ninth Circuit, we believe, has misconstrued the extent of the rights a student has under the First Amendment in a public school setting.
I was wondering, because I know in middle school, at least while I was still in school in Massachusetts, in a public school system, if a kid wore a t-shirt with a lewd slogan or image on it, they had to turn it inside out or go home.
Yeah, same happened in my school, particularly in the 1980s, something called the co-ed naked t-shirts, which were really hot in 1989,
Okay.
1990. And because they were lewd, the school could tell you to turn them inside out, or if they had swear words.
Mhm.
So they didn't have to just say swear words, but even if they were lewd, it couldn't happen in school.
Yeah.
One of the quotes from the decision was, "The First Amendment does not protect speech in school that is vulgar or inconsistent with the fundamental values of public school education." And it kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not a crotchety old man, but you can't just go around saying lewd stuff in school, right?
Yeah. The Queen Mab speech is very filthy.
So in the case, the dissent, and as I've said before, the dissent is always kind of my favorite part of Supreme Court cases. Because it's like the minority coming out and being like, I still stand for bibbidi bop. Justice Stevens, John Paul Stevens, wrote the dissent. And he said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. When I was a high school student, the use of those words in a public forum shocked the nation. Today, Clark Gable's four-letter expletive is less offensive than it was then." So he says that what is considered dirty or unprotected, as it were, in school can change over the years.
Yeah.
So let's let it be so.
Let it be kind of alive.
Let it be kind of alive.
For those of you listening who don't know what that's referencing, that's Rhett Butler
Oh, yeah.
from
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind. Yeah.
So, do you guys realize I could write you guys up for playing cards in school?
Really?
Completely and utterly being honest with you right now. Whether there's money being exchanged or not, cards are to be not played in school.
Okay, what about Uno?
No, just avoid it.
I do have a
Sure.
question about that.
Yeah.
So why is it that like some of the people, everybody famous, why are they always written about? Like they know everything about them. It's like so like the guy was saying that a lady's favorite quote. Well, I forget what it was, but he said something about the lady's favorite quote. How does they don't know everything about everybody. They only know about the important people. So it was all planned.
I'm not sure where you're like
What?
what
Famous, there's gonna be all kinds of stuff out there.
what lady are you talking about? Are you talking about from this?
Yeah. The history teacher was saying something about what's that family called?
Oh, you're talking about the Tinker.
Yeah, Tinker.
Yeah.
He said something about the Tinker.
So the Tinker, the family, the Tinker armband thing was, they had already planned it to put the armbands on, and then the school found out about it, and then they made the rule to make it not allowed. So the school purposely did it to stop something that they found out was going to happen. So it was kind of like an after the fact situation. So the Tinker said, listen, freedom of speech, we're allowed to do this. You can't stop us. And the Supreme Court came back and said, you're right. And that's how, like, if you guys were to come to school and you had something and you had like a statement on it, or if you just wore, like, I know that sometimes students will do the LGBTQ with the tape over their face, and they'll give me a card saying I'm protesting whatever, and I'm not speaking today in support of the LGBTQ community. Are they disrupting my class? No. So that situation is perfectly fine. But if they were to come into my class and like wave their rainbow flag and start yelling at me for that, then that would be a disruptive class.
Are you sure? Yes. I think yes. Are you sure?
So that's what they kind of knew this was coming. So part of it too, you'll hear about this lots of Supreme Court cases are on purpose. So like Plessy versus Ferguson, which we'll get to more, that was planned. They set the whole thing up on purpose because they wanted it to go to the Supreme Court. One of the questions you're going to get on your OGT is a question, the end of course state test, is if you are violating civil rights or you're violating some sort of law, will the courts find in favor of you or will they always find against you? The answer is against, but sometimes you do it on purpose so that it's made visible for everyone to see it or hear about it. So like there's like 4 or 5 cases right now that are going to Supreme Court to try to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is the case regarding abortion per state. But they're doing it on purpose, knowing they're going to have to appeal it up the process to get to the Supreme Court and force the Supreme Court to rule on abortion and the states' rights versus individual rights. So that's kind of where these are coming from.
2 more. They're going to be fast.
Okay.
So that was in 1986. We're going to go forward in time to another case. And this is Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeier. Now, so the Tinker case was cited in the Frazier case, and Tinker and Frazier are cited in Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeier. And that's what I love is like Supreme Court decisions are living. They build atop each other. Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeier decided in 1988. Kathy Kuhlmeier, she worked at a school newspaper called The Spectrum. What a fun name.
That is fun.
What a Roy G. Biv name. The Spectrum. And what they did when they wrote the Spectrum newspaper is they gave the proofs of what the paper was going to be to the principal, who looked it over and said, "Great job, kids," and printed it. Principal Reynolds got the proofs. It was a May issue. And there were 2 stories that the principal didn't really care for. One was about teen pregnancy, and the other was about divorce. So what he did was he didn't tell anybody. He just removed those articles and published the newspaper. Kathy Kuhlmeier and company got their paper, The Spectrum, opened it up and saw these 2 big articles were missing. And they said, what's up with that?
Mm-hmm.
And the principal said, that's, and he gave his reasons for it. Goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. This case comes before the court to resolve the issue of whether a school-sponsored high school newspaper produced and published by a journalism class as a part of the school-adopted curriculum under a teacher's supervision and subject to a principal's review is a public forum for the purpose of the First Amendment.
Can schools decide what you can and can't put in a school newspaper? So Hazelwood School District v. Kathy Kuhlmeier. Kuhlmeier got the help of the American Civil Liberties Union. She sued. She won. Then the Hazelwood District appealed it and went up to the Supreme Court. This vote was 5-3.
It's closer than the others.
And the victor, the Hazelwood School District. Schools do have the right to say what you can and can't put in a school newspaper. And this was Justice White who delivered the majority decision. He said, "The question we addressed in Tinker is different from the question whether the First Amendment requires a school to promote particular student speech. The former question addresses educators' ability to silence a student's personal expression that happens to occur on school grounds. But the latter question concerns educators' authority over school-sponsored publications." So this case goes on to say, if it's in a newspaper, if it's in a school play, if it's in a thing the school does, the school has the right to decide what can and can't be done. Mm-hmm. So you could do a rude play and the school could say, we're not going to put that play up. And your First Amendment rights are not violated. What do you think of that one?
I remember being very upset when my school, well, in retrospect, I get it. We were going to do The King and I prepared my audition song and everything from The King and I, and they decided, no, it's racist, we're not doing it.
Oh, wow.
It is racist.
Sure is.
They shouldn't have been doing it. But at the moment, I just thought, a bunch of soft-handed ninnies, it's not a good fit. But I understand it. I understand that there's an implicit, as though the school's agreeing with whatever is being put in this material because the school's name is on it.
Yeah. It's an interesting case. And I think because it extends to all sorts of things, musical performances, plays, think of all the possibilities this decision could change. And it still stands. I mean, Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeier stands.
Yeah. Not especially, there's always some tumult in the country, but right now I think you've got a lot of young people who feel very passionately about certain political and racial tensions. And if they want to write a piece about it and perhaps cite use of a racial slur or something. And they want to print that and talk about that word, for example, and why that word is wrong. And they're going to print it because it's important that you read it as it is, something like this, And the school says, we're not publishing that because that's a racial slur. Or maybe not even quite that. We're just not even going to really give you a reason beyond use of racial slur, and we're just not printing your piece. I think it could leave room for, let's say, a hyper-conservative principal to just push back on anything that offended his or her ideals.
Yeah. Well, I think you might be in the same bailiwick as this is one of my favorite dissents ever written. Justice William Brennan. The young men and women of Hazelwood East High expected a civics lesson, but not the one the court teaches them today. Such unthinking contempt for individual rights is intolerable from any state official. It's particularly insidious from a school principal to whom the public entrusts the task of inculcating in its youth an appreciation for the cherished democratic liberties that our Constitution guarantees. You listener, let's read the whole case. It's a fascinating dissent. It's a lot of fun, full of passion. One extra point that I want to make that Kathy Kuhlmeier made about defending her article staying in the newspaper was that there was so much teen pregnancy at her school that they had their own daycare.
Wow. I have never heard of that.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to write about teen pregnancy, but enough students are having sex and having underage children that you have a daycare at your high school.
That takes it to a completely different level.
And now we're to the last one.
All right.
And it's never the last one because, gosh, there's probably one being argued right now. And it's 2007, Morse v. Frederick. We're going to go all the way up. You know what I'm talking about. We're going to Juneau, Alaska.
And soon the moment everyone has been waiting for. And here are the first two torchbearers to enter the stadium.
This is during the torch relay for the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's so fun. A schoolhouse Supreme Court case that involves the Olympics. And
Respondent Joseph Frederick, a senior, was late to school that day. When he arrived, he joined his friends across the street from the school to watch the event. As the torchbearers and camera crews passed by, Frederick and his friends unfurled a 14-foot banner bearing the phrase, quote, "Bong hits for Jesus," end quote.
Bong hits for Jesus. I think 4 was the number. It was all capital letters except for the I in hits. Bong hits for Jesus. So Frederick hung up the Bong hits banner, and Principal Morse, Deborah Morse, she took the banner down, and Frederick was suspended. How would you rule on this one?
It may fall under the lewd category.
Bong, because it.
Well, not lewd, but generally inappropriate because it's citing drugs.
You have these 9 old Supreme Court justices, men and women, talking about bong hits for Jesus. And one of them kept being like, there was a cryptic message. Such cryptic. What did he mean? Bong hits for Jesus.
I mean, that's what I actually seriously don't understand. Suppose the school has the following rule. Oh, by the way, on our field trips, you can carry around 15-foot banners. They can say anything. Except they can't talk about drugs, and they can't talk about sex, and they can't talk about, I don't know, or I'd say 3 things. Would that be constitutional?
Well, I think a school could certainly prohibit the display of banners on a school trip or in a school assembly.
Suppose that this particular person had whispered to his next door neighbor, "Bong hits for Jesus." I suppose that's what it happened.
How are they going to vote? Is the boy in the banner protected? Or was the principal in her rights thinking of what you know about Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeier, thinking of what you know of the Tinker Standard, and thinking of what you know about Frazier?
I think, given what I've learned so far from this lesson, the principal is protected.
Really?
Yeah, because we've seen 2 cases where if there's objectionable material, the school is in the right to say no.
The court votes 5-4, close one, in favor of Principal Morse. You got it. Nail on the head. And who wrote the decision was the newest Chief Justice, Justice Roberts.
Okay.
It was an early decision of the Roberts Court. he said in his decision, he said, Tinker held that student expression may not be suppressed unless school officials reasonably conclude that it's going to disrupt the work of the school. Frazier demonstrates that the constitutional rights of students in public school are not automatically coexistent with the rights of adults in other settings. Like Frazier, if he had said those rude words outside of school, that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But he couldn't say them in school. And then Kuhlmeier acknowledged that schools may regulate some speech even though the government couldn't censor it outside of the school. And finally, the concern here is not that Frederick's speech was offensive, but that it was reasonably viewed as promoting illegal drug use.
So my biggest issue with all of this is that all of these Supreme Court judges are saying, you know, you've got adult rights and then you've got what happens to kids in the school, in the public school system.
Yeah.
And so it's basically saying that children do not have the same rights as adults.
Right.
In this certain
In this
realm.
public school setting.
Right. So why is it that the public school is this hallowed ground where students are stripped of something?
Well, do you think that students should have the right to say whatever they want whenever they want in school?
No.
Well, let's talk about disruption first of all.
Okay.
Can somebody stand up and start screaming in class and disrupt your lessons?
People do it.
They do it, but should they be allowed to do it?
Well, they're punished.
Right, so should they not be punished?
No, I think they should be punished. And I guess the idea is that it's a learning environment. We're trying to teach our youth how to be responsible, how to earn those rights as adults.
Yes.
I can see that. I can understand that. I was also always a good kid. So it's easy for me to just imagine, not to say that these are bad kids who are dissenting.
Yeah.
But I only ever saw that as entertaining, and I never came up against sitting in the principal's office for having shouted an expletive.
I mean, I don't think it's. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool champion of freedom of speech. I always have been, you know. But all these cases, like both sides make sense to me. You know, something in them makes sense to me. So I can understand the court's difficulty in making these decisions.
Yeah.
And in the dissent from Morse v. Frederick, it's Justice John Paul Stevens again, and his dissent by the end of it gets around to the point of basically this whole thing we've been talking about. He starts with this. He says, although this case began with a silly, nonsensical banner, it ends up with the court inventing out of whole cloth a special First Amendment rule permitting the censorship of any student speech that mentions drugs. And then he says, the Vietnam War is remembered today as an unpopular war. But during the Tinker era, during its early stages, the dominant opinion that Justice Harlan mentioned in his Tinker dissent regarded opposition to that war as unpatriotic, if not treason. So look where we are now. Who knows if feelings about drugs cannot change?
We know that they can change.
We know
We're
that
seeing
they can.
marijuana laws change across the country.
Absolutely. So I really like that in his dissent for this case, as he references Tinker and he says, guys, don't forget, you know, the Vietnam War, you would be just screamed at for opposing the Vietnam War. You'd get in trouble. People would get into fights with you at bars. I really like that he comes back to Tinker and he comes back in a way that's supportive of this. The Constitution is interpreted, and those interpretations change over the years. These four students, Tinker, Frazier, Kuhlmeier, Frederick. Four.
So those are the four names you guys are going to want to remember. Tinker, Kuhlmeier,
Tinker, Kuhlmeier,
Frazier,
Tinker, Kuhlmeier, Frazier,
and Frederick. So Tinker, Kuhlmeier. For those who want it, write it down. K-U-H.
He's got it. Tinker, Kuhlmeier, Franklin, and Freilich, right?
Frederick.
Tinker,
Kuhlmeier, Frazier, Frederick.
Frederick. Kuhlmeier.
Q.
T-C. What for Frederick? Frederick starts with an F.
I spelled Frederick.
Okay. The other question you guys are going to get is going to be regarding your thoughts on freedom of speech in school. Again, open-ended.
What was that? Myers? Your Myers?
Kuhlmeyer. Kuhl. M-E-I-E-R. So you'll see some questions on that. But let's get back to this one right here. So this is where we were on Tuesday. So Tuesday we had gotten to bearing arms, right to bear arms, Second Amendment. Do you have the note packets?
Yeah.
Okay. So, for this one, the right to bear arms. This is a lesson in grammar, right? So I know I talked about this on Tuesday for a moment, but the comma really defines the entire Second Amendment rights. Go ahead. So I think the big debate that we have nowadays isn't necessarily the gun itself or being able to own the gun. It's the type of guns that are being owned. Because it always comes back to, well, a handgun's okay and a shotgun, but you should probably be a hunter if you have a shotgun. Right? So you start to have people start to put limitations on what types of weapons. The issue that you'll hear about a ton is the slippery slope. Because if I can stop you from owning this gun, what's stopping you from getting this gun? What's stopping you from getting this gun?
Can't you just get it from somewhere else?
Well, I think that's the other concern too, is where you're getting these things. Because I know that if you go to a gun show, it's a lot easier to get the weapons there. The background checks. You guys know how a background check works, by the way?
Yeah.
You just put your name in the system, and if there's anything that's attached to your name, they can deny you the right. But if there's nothing attached to your name, they can automatically come back and say, yeah, there's nothing attached to you. Like, I have no felonies, no misdemeanors, and it comes back to you pretty quickly. Yeah.
I just want to say I've been to a gun show, and you can get any kind of weapon you can imagine. They got swords, they got knives, they got rifles, they got handguns.
You don't have the 18.
Yeah, no.
And I know that they're supposed to have limitations, they're supposed to have rules at those. But that's the other thing too, is if I'm going to limit the guns at the gun show, what other weapons can I limit as well? And are there some practical issues? Of course, there's some practical issues. The big one is the psychological background. That's a big one that we're running into. A lot of the mass shootings that we're running into, we're finding that the people are having some major psychological issues or pre-existing conditions, per se psychological mostly. Part of it too isn't like the one Sandy Hook, which was the elementary school. That wasn't even his guns; those were his parents' guns that he was able to get. So the parents didn't do anything wrong. Does the kid then also affect your ability to purchase a weapon? What if you're trying to purchase a weapon to protect your family? Now, go down the road of what caliber is too big, what caliber is not big enough. Am I allowed to have a 9mm? Can I have a 45? Can I have I think the big question we typically run into is the types of weapons that are being bought.
I think we should allow flamethrower, and that's it.
Yeah.
No pistols.
We
No
have a
pistols.
flamethrower at my house.
No pistols. No anything. Just flamethrower.
No,
because imagine like you're sitting in the middle of the night, they have a bat, you have a flamethrower. Who's gonna win this fight? A wooden bat versus a flame?
But they have to tell you
Well, then we'll melt the bat. What's the problem here?
Or burn the bat.
They have a problem. You have a flamethrower. Your house is burning down.
Flamethrower.
No,
The absolute intimidation of a flamethrower will scare you.
Hey guys. Alright. There's something like that.
Oh, no.
It's like you might like getting under or something.
Yeah, you're ready to fight me. You're ready to like juke it.
So again, hey folks, let's bring it back in. So with this, I think the debate, one, in order to get rid of the Second Amendment, you have to get 3/4 of the states to vote on getting rid of it, which you're never going to get that many states to say yes, we're in favor of getting rid of the Second Amendment. Even if they wanted to change the Constitution to adjust it, like kind of we had the Prohibition, and they got rid of drinking, and then they brought it back. They could do the same thing with the Second Amendment, but again, I don't think you're going to get the state support because you have to have the state conventions agree with this and say yes, we're in favor of it. Yeah.
I just want to say you can get a really powerful flamethrower on Amazon, but it's
which makes me worried.
It's labeled under boat heat shrink wrap gun, and it connects up to a propane tank. And it's for shrink wrapping. Why are you telling me about this? I shall protect my house. They're like $1,500.
All right, ladies. If you want to meet tomorrow, just let me know. Otherwise, everything will just be on Moodle for you. Okay? All right. I'll talk to you guys later. You too. Okay. See you guys.
So if you want to say the first couple like questions on like project.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over that. Yeah, I'll go over that with you guys.
Hey, why are you sitting in front of me? Or is that the
I guess it's technically the I don't know.
Yo, we got new boxes. Bet. See those boxes? Those things go crazy.
Good.
Oh, so you like when I talk?
No. It's the opposite.
What do you think this is? What do you think this is? Huh? It's chilly in here. Close it. Everybody makes it on a full round. Look like a dad. You get half of one. When you get your Ranger seat, take me to the high school. You get half of one. Ethan, do you want to take me to high school after school? Sure. Actually? Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you pay money.
Oh, dang. I don't care. Oh, bet. Do you get out fast, like out of the parking lot?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So how, like, when should I go to your truck? I'll just go with you. That's
No. You want? No, I should get to go with you.
I forgot this is first period, last period. It says 115. It's for yesterday. I can't leave early. I can't leave early.